Hello everybody. After 10 weeks we arrive to the end of the Faenza Prize talks. It was a great pleasure to meet the artists and enter in a sort of journey in their works, experiences and studies. Today we will conclude our conversation, and at the end I will show you the pieces of the artists who weren't able to participate in the talks. In that way you will have a complete survey of this very special edition. The book of the 61st Faenza Prize Special Edition will be presented on Saturday 27th March at 4 p.m. together with some jurors. It will be another opportunity to meet you all online. But next week, on March 25th, we will present a special project called Future Light in Ceramic, a project which was supposed to be exhibited during the Faenza Prize, but inevitably cancelled. We will meet 8 young European artists together with the curator Jana Goebel from Porzellanicon in Selb. So let's start this new conversation with the first guest, Matteo Lucca.
Hello, Claudia.
Okay, you can start your presentation, and we will ask Stefania to put online your images.
So, okay, good evening. I'm Matteo Lucca from Italy. First, I would like to thank the museum and the commission for selecting my work. The central theme of my artistic research faces the relationship between the body and the earth. This relationship has led me to reflect on aspects and forms of a symbolic and archetypal nature. The theme of nourishment and then of the return journey, as I will explain more later. The first step of this research has started from here. These are the molds in terracotta with the print of my face inside, but they have a specific function. Indeed, I use these cups to make my bread face. With I organized events where people could eat them. In this case, the ceramic is for me a part of the creative process and not only the final work. They are for me the space for my creation. We can next picture, please. Okay, thank you. After the facial molds, I create the whole body. Inside these forms are the imprints of the male and female body. They are made of different pieces tied together by a wire. And I consider these works as sculptures and tools at the same time. Next picture, please. And there is a video. Okay, and we can play the video. So in this video, we can see better my process of my work. My idea is that my rule is to create a context in which creation and life, in this case the bread, can grow freely. My choice is to guide the creation without controlling it. And what I mean by this, that once I put the bread dough into the mold and into the oven, I just wait for the bread to be baked. And during baking, I never know what's going on, and I light the fire and the dough with the yeast generate the form while it's baking. The oven is represent the mother womb for me, where life is generated, and the mold of the body is the space where identity takes shapes. We are near to the end of this video, and we can wait just a bit to show the ends. Yeah, we can hear when I put inside my sculpture the ceramic and the bread. Okay. Next video, please. Well, so the time has come, and the work is taken out of the oven, and each time the terracotta mold is disassembled, and sometimes I eat also my sculpture in bread. I never know what the figure of bread will look like once it removed from the mold. Each time is different, even if the mold is always the same. Inside the mold, the bread grows adhering to the imprint of the body or the face as before, and where it finds the open space, it grows freely following its natural rising process. The action of the fire is a key factor in this whole process. Now here we can see an installation of mine with a group of bread figure. The initial discourse of the offering of the body has been expanded in and has become a reflection of the human being in a different aspect. Using bread is a way of narrating the human being through the meaning of the bread. The work I create have a continuous play of duality, well-baked part and barn part, a dialogue between the figure of the body in the front and the informal part in the back. I think this leads me to think about the complexity of the human being. Next picture, please. So my relationship with the earth becomes more direct. Then the intention here was to create a shape with my handprint on one side and a hollow form on the other side, using only my body. My action was to grasp the clay with my hands and press it with my head in the earth, both at the same time. So that's why I tried to find a different kind of position of my body. Randomness remains the central focus for me, and the resulting form is a consequence that I don't decide before. Next picture, please. Okay. The theme of nourishment in relation to the body and the earth is declined in drinking. To drink from this cup, you have to put your hands in the imprint of mine, and somehow the encounter that happens is double. The person who drinks meets my body through my imprint of my hands, but also he meets the earth by moving into it with his hands and face during the act of drinking. Okay, next picture, please. Okay, perfect. And we approach now the work selected. I would like to read you a text by the artist Anna Hilar that wrote about this work. Nostos open up a direct dialogue between the action of the artist and the response of the earth, which become a work of art in a real body to body. It's a ritual and symbolic journey that Matteo undertakes through a dance, a dialogue of ancient voices that the earth know how to welcome. It's a prayer of the body in search of the habitat. Okay, the title is Nostos. It's a Greek word that indicates the sense of nostalgia for the return. It's the journey that Ulysses makes to Ithaca, and Ithaca represents the place of origin, the place where you can find yourself. For me, the meaning of this work is a return or a going back to the mother in relationship toward the earth and the womb. Next picture. Okay, we can play also the video. Okay, here we are at the end, and we can see a documentation of the realization of the work Nostos, and a video which is a research made before. The key words of this work are the ritual, the circularity, the repetition of the gesture that leaves a mark on them passage. It's in this circularity that Nostos was born. Ulysses' journey to Ithaca looks the horizon, but in this work, the journey is vertical towards the depth of the earth. The action is to inhabitate a block of clay by walking on oneself, leaving the trace of each step until digging deep into it. In this way, the earth becomes kind of a vase as it prepares to welcome back into its womb each seeking step. Through this action, the clay transforms, reforms, cracks, expand, creating an informal expressive matter step. So how we can see in this video is almost night. It passed really a full day, and also my presentation is finished. So thank you very much for listening me.
Thank you, Matteo. It is very inspiring, your work, and I really like this reflection that you made with the mother earth and the bread, the kind of nourishment from the two sides. And there is an interesting question that I would like to ask you. And Nele van Wieringen is asking, how important is to you that the figures are consumed? So your bread figures, the destination of this.
It depends. Sometimes I used to give them to eat for the people during some events. So they are something like a ritual of love for me. Sometimes I leave them in the nature to disappear in the nature, like a body offering for the world. And sometimes I use also to make treatment to conserve them and to make them strong and to last longer.
Yes, this might be a big matter of conservation for contemporary art, because you know that it is always the big problem for restorators that needs to work with new materials, and in this case it is a very old material, but taken in with a different approach. So thank you, Matteo, for your journey together with us. And I am quoting one of your sentence that you said that, for example, you'd like with your art to nourish people, and that is a very nice thought. So we pass to Makiko Nagai, another artist selected for this Faenza Prize. She is Japanese, and I'd like to give her the word for introducing us her journey in her work. So Makiko, is to you. Stefania, unmute her microphone.
Hello everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm sorry my English is no good. Now I would like to read my presentation. I've loved drawing and making things since I was a kid. I always felt joy, especially when working with colorful materials. After graduating from high school, I studied fashion illustration at Setsu Mode Seminar in Tokyo. It's where Yoji Yamamoto and Rei Kawakubo also studied. The school emphasized beautiful color composition rather than technique and realism. I started making pottery because I wanted to make mosaic from ceramic tile. So I entered Ishoten in Tajimi City to learn ceramic 2017. I received Kato Tomonari Award at the graduation exhibition. He won the Faenza Grand Prize in 2009. The title of my work for the Faenza Award is Maki Tribe. Maki is my name. When I start making my work, I don't have any concept. I'm like a child playing with clay. I just follow my instincts. When I felt fun, I make more and more. Before titling my work, I ask myself, why did I make something like this? As a result, I noticed that the work shows what I usually think about in my daily life. As I said at the beginning, I like things full of color, especially when I see folk art and local tradition of indigenous culture throughout the world and in Japan. I feel the pure joy of expression through creating and decorating. Festival garment to reflect this joy of creating. Some have vibrant and almost aggressive color, but at the same time, they blend with nature. In the contemporary world of consumerism and mass production, efficiency is what makes the gears turn faster. Decorations are removed and inefficient processes are dropped. We are left with simple, uniform, streamlined product, but lose diversity, character, and personality. I want to resist this urge to be efficient. I think creating and decorating is necessary for life. I wish we were in a world where everyone is appreciated for who they are. These thoughts are bases of my work. It's the spirit of my creation. Next, please. There are two reasons why I choose clay for my expression. The first is materiality of clay. It has a ability to tap into my primal instincts. I feel that the materiality of clay reveals maker's raw character. This is what is interesting about clay. The second reason I use ceramic is the range of color. The endless possibility of creating color in ceramics fascinates me. Most of the time, I make my own glaze using metal oxides. Next, please. Next. It can be unstable and give unexpected results. But that's why it's fun. It's where the beauty is. It has a certain earthly, natural feel that pulls me in. On the other hand, ready-made pigments produce the expected color. I use both the predictable and the unpredictable glaze by mixing and starting them to get the color and form I want. Next, please. Here, I developed the multi-tribe series into a more functional form. The cup on the left can even hold boiling water. The lampshade uses two different porcelain with different translucency. This is my new celadon series. I'm playing with traditional celadon in my own way by combining it with copper red and cobalt blue. That's all. Thank you for your attention. Grazie mille.
Domo arigato. It was a pleasure to listen to you and to see how is important in your work this use of different glazes and different colors, and the decoration is the main point of this family of works, your Maki tribe. And yes, it's quite unusual because you are strongly colorful, and in comparison to Matteo of the work before, which was a very neutral work based on earth, we have a very different position in the expression of your work. So thank you very much. We will follow the conversation, and we will see if there are other questions for you. But now we will pass the word to Julian Stair, British artist. It's a pleasure to have you here in this stage, and the word is to you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and thank you to the Faenza organization at large for not only arranging the prize and this wonderful program, but today's talk. And I also would like to say thank you to everyone listening, because I'm very privileged. I can talk in my natural tongue, in English, which I feel somewhat embarrassed about in this very international group. So thank you for listening to me in English, because I know it's not all of your first language. I titled my little talk Matters of Life and Death, and in a way that's kind of is a summary of the reason why I choose to work in ceramics, and I will use the word pottery and pots unashamedly, because it's an art form, an art genre that actually engages in life in the most extraordinary way. And the archaeological record is indicative of that. We only have to go into some of the great museums in the world to see all the objects that have been made throughout over millennia by different cultures, and the extraordinary way in which ceramics have been made, not just to deal with practical issues, but to shape life philosophically, conceptually, symbolically, and ritually. And I started off thinking that I would show you a slide of a piece of work that I made in 1977. And this was early work when I was very young. And it's a sculpture. It's a freestanding relief. So this is actually just photographed on a shelf. And the reason why I started off with this was because it was an interesting avenue to explore for me in a kind of creative exchange or creative, inquiry. But just making purely sculptural work, I felt wasn't satisfying enough. And so that's a kind of a marker to show what I have moved away from. And ever since then, the 1970s, I have been exploring the realm of ceramics, in particular around the vessel form and the pot, because I think conceptually and philosophically it's extraordinarily rich. There's an irony. If we could have the next slide, please. There's an irony, which is that pottery is so familiar in our lives that it almost becomes invisible. But the process of the very nature of its familiarity means that people and we ourselves don't, I think, fully see it, recognize it, or value its interest. So I've gone from a slide of a sculpture through to a slide of an action. And I chose this image particularly because it's not of a static object. It's an action that is in a photograph is taken as kind of in the middle of the action, which is drinking from a cup. And so that shows that the actual engagement with pots, the way we use them, is dynamic. And in a way, that is kind of the summary of what I'm trying to talk about, is from kind of static observation through to dynamic engagement. If we could go to the next slide, please. These are this is a piece of work which is fairly recent, but it's a theme that I have been exploring through over the last 20 years, which is to try and represent pots that are very familiar. We all understand the object here, which is a cup. It's an incredibly simple cup. It doesn't even have a handle. But what I'm trying to do here is to present it in a way that make people look twice at it, because they're not just objects to look at; they're objects to engage with on a multitude of levels, and it's an attempt to try and break the complacency or the familiarity that we feel that we associate with pots, because they're objects which we use in our daily lives. So this was an attempt to, if you like, take it out of a context, of a familiar context, and I make these plinths, I call them grounds, and it's about articulating the space and presenting them as objects. I'm not changing the object, they're still usable, but that is obviously only one of their facets of their identity. And so this is about, again, trying to make people think twice about the familiar. Could we have the next slide, please? And in terms of making people think twice, this is an exhibition which was a very large exhibition that it took 2 years to make. And it's an exhibition about death, because when you look at the archaeological record, as I said at the beginning, pots have been used in so many different contexts. And if you go into any major museum, you'll see that pots aren't just associated with the domesticity of life, with food and drink, but very often they've been used as containers to mediate death and various other rituals surrounding death from cultures literally all around the world and over millennia. And this was an exhibition to show that vessels have been used in many different forms. So this is a series of sarcophagi. These are full size. They were meant to hold the body in burial, then designed to do so. And if you look at the very, very end, I don't know whether how clearly you can see it, but there's some life-size pots at the very bottom of the corridor. And this is this is drawing on the incredibly powerful symbol of pots, the vessels, as bodies, because the symbolic language of pottery is anthropomorphic. We talk about pots in terms of body parts. We talk about the neck, the lip, the belly, the shoulder, the foot of a pot. There's this extraordinary connection with us as human beings. And the very notion of containment, the fact that pots are designed to hold and contain things, there's parallel between the body holding and containing, of the physical body holding and containing the human soul or the spirit. So this was about the kind of anthropomorphic symbolism of the vessel, and that's what this exhibition was addressing. If I could have the next image, please. This is a jar that was made for an individual family member. So to try and really reinforce this idea of this kind of very incredible kind of connection between the body and the vessel, this was made I made this clay out of his cremated ash. So after my family member was cremated, I made a bone china. For those of you who aren't ceramic people, you may not know, but bone china is actually made from burnt bone, normally from cattle. But in this case, I made it from my relative. And so the jar is made from him. It's organically, completely, it doesn't have any organic element. It's completely chemically inert. But what it means is you can actually reach out and touch the person who was alive. And therefore, this idea of the pot as a symbol goes full circle, because it is him. It's a pot that's made from him to hold him while symbolically representing him. And this show, in this room, because it was about one individual, I included audio-visual elements, which was his voice and recordings of him talking, and photographs and film of his life. Next slide, please. This is just again to show ways in which I have tried to make work that engages in life. I don't have a religious faith, but I was commissioned by a priest and an architect to make work for a church that was being refurbished. And I made the font. I was absolutely delighted to be asked to make a font, because fonts are how we mark the beginning of life. You know, the ritual of christening with water in this very orchestrated and significant way. To make that as a vessel was a great privilege. And you think about a font, it is effectively, it's a pot, it's a vessel, it's a container that's made to hold water. And if you look beyond the font, you can see that there's an altar, and that is the altar in the church. So these two objects, for me, really, although I'm not religious, it was an honor to make them, these objects, which are at the epicenter of this church's life. You know, the altar, which is symbolic of the table in Christianity. You know, the services are all conducted through that, on it and through it. And again, it's this incredibly kind of powerful connection. The next image, please. This is at my London gallery. This is a show that's from 2 years ago at Corvimora, an Italian, Tommaso Corvimora. And this was an exhibition that I juxtaposed large and small versions of the same forms, hence the name equivalence. And what I wanted to do was, in this case, I wanted to show that pots aren't just about use and function, because I think that's a very limited way of looking at them. But of course, they're sculptural objects as well. So I took forms that were very familiar, that were made in a small scale. If you please go on to the next slide, you'll see one of the small forms that are on the back wall. So there were 5 forms made, and this is a simple porcelain cup. Could we go back to the previous slide, please? No, the previous one. Thank you. And you can see that that form is in the to the far left of the 5 big objects. And this is what I submitted for Faenza. So this was to show that when you take pots out of context, then again, it's hopefully a way of people seeing them in a different way. Larger, in a white cube environment, they become sculpture. But what does that say about the smaller pots? And if we go on to the next slide, please. Everything that those large forms are, my claim was that these forms are also. So we should look at these familiar objects with a much more questioning mind. And then the final image is, if you go on to the next slide, please, is an exhibition again I had at Corvimora in 2014. And Tommaso and I were talking about doing something that was a little bit more unusual than an exhibition of work on plinths in a kind of standard way. And I said what I wanted to do was to really try and demonstrate the complexity, the absolute richness of the life of pots. So I made a dinner service, and here we have a kind of London fine art gallery showing communal garden objects that we eat and drink from. So there's cups and saucers and there's plates. They're very, very, very familiar objects. But of course, there's a paradox that when you show objects that are dynamic, they have lives outside of the gallery, outside of the museum, outside of the exhibition case. You're not aware of that when you actually exhibit them in a gallery or a museum. And there's this terrible disassociation between the way in which we consume art in a formal way through museums and galleries to the way we consume art in real life. So this image shows you that there was a dinner service. It's for 18 people. It's really huge table, but there was also a video of the meal. And if we go on to the next slide, which is a video which there isn't time to play. And if the video is playing, in a minute you'll see. Okay, well, you can see the video on my website. Basically, what happens is once the video plays, the table starts to become set. And if you could fast forward to about a third of the way through. And the video is very much about showing the laying of the table. If you fast forward to say, yes, thank you, carry on, lovely, this is brilliant. And if you stop now, you see that people have arrived. And this is a shot from overhead. And what this really was designed to do was to show the multivalence of pottery. I said to everyone who sat down at the beginning of the meal to eat, that all their five senses would come into play: sight, sound, touch. But because there's food, taste and smell. Now, if you think about contemporary art has been trying to show a breadth that goes beyond just the gallery, the framed painting or the sculpture on a plinth. So really my point here is that this very familiar everyday genre of pottery is actually incredibly complicated and deserves to be reevaluated and reconsidered within our contemporary world. And the notion of physicality, materiality, tactile engagement, as well as visual stimulus, and as well as kind of conceptual, intellectual ideas, it's an extraordinary genre that has got more than enough to keep me going for my lifetime and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. It was very brilliant, your presentation, and thank you for your reflection, because it's too long a time that I am working on this idea of revaluation of the ceramic language, and I think that we have all to work on this commitment and engagement of ceramic in life, and be aware of this. Yeah. And I will quote you in my conferences. Oh. Yes, of course, because you said ceramics shapes life, and this is very important, and this is very familiar concept for me, that I'm working in a city of ceramic, but especially working in a museum with a range of beautiful pieces coming from the 4000 before Christ till today. And yes, we have to force people to think twice. Exactly. With ceramic, and yes, we have to force our critical part, our intellectual, to not to leave ceramic as an invisible tool, but as a powerful language. So thank you for your reflection. And Antonio Fois, who is an artist in London, says that it is fascinating listening to your presentation. I guess working with the ashes of relatives has informed you practice in a very specific way. I'm curious about the relationship you have created with the actual piece. Can you answer this?
Yes, I think our personal relationship with what we do is very important. So I took the ash of my relative and I ground him up and I made it into a material that then I could combine with other ceramic materials to make a bone china. So I was mixing him up with my bare hands and my arms. And so that, had an emotional content to me. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is the way this hopefully works as an art object in the world. And really, I wanted to personalize the theme of the exhibition, which was around death, by highlighting one individual person who in a way was representative of everyone else and all the other work in the show. And it was this idea of embodying him within a concept and a material just somehow seemed to summarize everything, the power that I feel that ceramics and pots can offer.
Yes, it was very emotional what you express, and we receive your feeling on this. So thank you, Julian,
Thank
for
you very
share this with us, and thank you for your reflection. And we will use your thought with great inspiration for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you.
So let's pass to another artist, Anne-Marie van Spranger from the Netherlands. Thank you, Anne-Marie. The
Hello.
stage is yours, so go on with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Claudia. With my work, I try to change fragility into strength. The challenge is always how to occupy space and what right size do a sculpture needs to transmit this. I ask myself questions about humanity, human scale with my sculptures, and try to understand more about life itself. A lot of people can visit the exposition, but is it still a personal and private journey reading the sculptures? I try to make the atmosphere open, to zoom in. How to occupy space? I try to shape abstract questions into readable forms. How to design an atmosphere? How to make an installation which enrich me making new sculptures and finding the right material that strengthens the idea. Working on a project for me is only interesting when there is a good chance that I came out of it a little bit as another person, someone at least who had had enriched experience. Only then there is a chance that also the visitor can have an enriched experience too. Can you please be so kind to the first slide from the first? Yes, thank you very much. I will show you 7 projects who are made between 2007 and 2020, who I show completely mixed up. Here you see the first, and the left sculpture is 10 centimeter long, and the right sculpture is 8 centimeter long. Working with bone china porcelain is like working with a strong, autonomous, and inspiring character. The shrinking in the kiln makes the object smaller than I can make it myself. That's a quality who fits next to the white very well with my ideas for sculpture. Since 1996, I do work with porcelain. I was asked to write a plan for working in the EKWC, the European Ceramic Work Center in the Netherlands. I never worked with ceramics before and started directly with porcelain. The staff of the EKWC 25 years ago thought that it was very unwise, but I do like to do not like to work just with clay. I was started for me with a fantastic adventure and who still goes on. Since then, I think in porcelain. Next slide, please. This is the installation Hanging and Standing, which I do make for the Princess of the National Museum of Ceramics in the north of the Netherlands in Leeuwarden. For the sculptures in the museum, Theo Remy, the designer, made a wooden floor with plaster on the top. That was directly made in the room, and it measured 8 by 4 meters. Next slide, please. On a bicycle through the landscape, in a distance, you see something. What is that? Is it an elephant? Something. But what exactly? Slowly we came near to the focus point, the location. In the time that you try to invent where you are looking at, everything is possible. The associations are going from impossible to unlikely and back in a very rapid pace. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. To present a sculpture is exciting. Do I observe or see? Do the visitor observe or see? The visitor enters the space. They must be something that asks for attention. Next slide, please. Now I will show you 3 projects who were made of other materials. This is a 3D print of plastic and is 20 centimeter high. I modeled this sculpture 50 centimeter high. For this idea, I was searching for a suitable material for making the smaller size sculpture that I can work on as a journey. Everything must be possible in the making process. So I do make it of a very soft Nagiplast clay and hang it in a box with the arms on strings. After that, it was scanned and printed in a reduced size. Next slide, please. This sculpture is called Hypsophilia. It was a commission of the Museum Beelden aan Zee in Den Haag for the opening of their Hypsotheca. Museum Beelden aan Zee is a museum specially for 3-dimensional sculptures. It is a sculpture of cast plaster, which is 26 centimeter high and made in an edition of hundreds sculptures. The cabinets around the heart contains walls with reliefs. The reliefs are inspired by the history of the start of the collection of this museum, based on sculptures of the human image. The reliefs are, just as in a Hypsotheca, from different scales. They are made much larger to make it possible to work on the details, and then it was scanned and printed much smaller. Next slide, please. This installation is called Lentesneeuw. It is spring snow in English, and I specially made it for TAC in Eindhoven. There are 45 paneling sculptures made of paper, varying from 20 centimeter to 39 centimeter. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. The sculptures are made like you do make drawings and paper cuts when you are a child, with the fascination from making something and unfolding it. So you see the completely new shape, which you still make yourself. Next slide, please. We are still back at bone china again. This is a series of 14 situations, drum solos, they were called, porcelain and iron treat. And the maximum height of a sculpture is 26 centimeter. And I specially made it for a presentation in Galerie de Witte Voet in Amsterdam. Next slide, please. Drum solos I did make after a commission. I do feel the need to lying awake from questions I ask myself. The question was, how can I combine 2 extreme elements, the power of drum kit and the character of the bone china, in one series? Next slide, please. The drums were very, very sleek in the beginning. I was really afraid for them. It was terrible. But luckily in the kiln, they were employed so I can use them together with the cymbals with the fresh edges. Next slide, please. Now we come at a piece for the work for the Faenza Prize. There were 7 kick cymbals made of porcelain and iron treat in wooden boxes. Next slide, please. The smallest box is 14 centimeter. and the biggest box is 28 centimeter. Next slide, please. Here you can see the foot pedal of for the kick pedals of the cymbals. I want to make a series focused by the opposites of the immense loudness and the enormous silence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It was very interesting, your presentation, and I very like your the idea that you use this extreme fragility to create this impossible landscape, this very big installation. And the selected works for the Faenza Prize was very interesting for also the symbolic part that it was involved, and so we just see it in not in presence but in your images, and thank you for joining us, because I know that you were not supposed to be in the part of this conversation. So there is one question that I'd like to ask you, because one of this Alex de Vries, who wrote a special piece for the catalog for you, said that your work with this idea of fragility is perfectly inside the history of Dutch sculpture. So can you explain this sentence, because I really think that it was a kind of break you make with the Dutch sculpture, because it is so soft, you're so gentle, so incredibly intellectual, your work, that I don't think that it is so connected with the big monuments that the Dutch sculpture realize in contemporary and in the past. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm very sorry, but when I read that, yeah, for me, there's when Alex wrote something like that, there is for me it's I hear it a little bit different, because it gives an extra space, and that is I read it like that, and that is much more abstract, and that is something what I try to present with my work very much. So I have read it that way, that he can see an enormous extra space in it, and I was so happy with it that I go to read it again, and I go to read and to think about your question. But that's the only thing I can say now.
No, it was just my reflection, because I said, "Wow, what is it behind this concept?" So no, thank you. It was just asking you your.
Oh, but it's okay. Very good. I can see it in another way. That's very. Yeah, I liked it. Thank you.
Yeah, no. And everybody, of course, will read the text that I mentioned in the book of the Faenza Prize that will be presented next Saturday. So thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. Thank you, all the artists. But before closing this conversation, I would like to show you the images of the artists that were not able to participate in this conversation for different motivations. So I asked Stefania to put the PowerPoint on, and because, as you know, not all the artists were in our talks, and 8 of them were not present, but it's a pity not to show their work, so you can have a perfect vision of what was the selection of the prize. And it is interesting that so there is a problem of connection. Okay, Stefania, you can find them in the talks. So sorry for this, for interrupting this. Okay, it was as you can see in all of this presentation and conversation, we see very different points approaching to ceramic, to sculpture, and to the idea of this beautiful material that it is today very, very contemporary. And I'm very happy to have listened the words by Julian because he pointed out what is the big problem and of approaching this material since I can say since 20 years ago, especially in Italy. We had very big problems for the critic of art, and so in this edition of the Faenza Prize, we saw very, very different approach. And we can start the presentation of the artists that were selected but not in the talks with Kerstin Abram, with this installation of mixed medias, starting from the newspaper, Italian newspapers, and the title is Drawing Ornament, reflects ornament drawing. And he made this installation thanks to a public museum that offered the space during the lockdown. Then we moved to another artist, David Cassini, who presented this installation of this mask, these harlequins, that recalled a work made by Paul Klee. And it is David is not working just with ceramic, but he made a lot of works and big installation, and it's a very subtle, intellectual work, and we are very pleased to have this in the selected artists. Then we move to Nathalie Doyen, who presented this sculpture meditation with this incredible surface of stoneware. Then Laurent Dufour from France with this sculpture with this beer. We move to Lucy Morrow, Irish based in France, who is working with this installation of fragments, and this is the work selected. Tamara Van San, another artist which put together different materials, glaze, earthenware, and marble in this case. Then we move to Lily Wang with this installation of porcelain. And then we move to the category under 35 with Elena Gileva with this installation Orthostadt. So this is now you have all the complete vision of the selection of the Faenza Prize, but we will see them in the presentation of the catalog. My invitation is for next Thursday, when we will introduce another project devoted to very young artists working with ceramics, and which is a project inside a European project. The title is, as I said before, Future Light in Ceramics. And we will have 8 young artists introducing their work, their experience, like we made in these talks. And so my invitation will be for next week. And thank you all the artists that were present in this occasion. Thank you, Matteo. Thank you, Maki. Thank you, Julian, and thank you, Anne-Marie. The public enjoy your presentation, and there is a good interest, and good luck for the future, and see you next week on our YouTube channel or Facebook channel. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
終わりました。お疲れ様です。
これでもう切っちゃっていいの？
あ、もう終わっちゃう。